Everything is wonderful now! Warner Bros. Released the first trailer for Wonder Woman this week, and we finally got to see where all the color in the DC Cinematic Universe went. And before you go thinking that this is just a DC version of Captain America, remember that this movie takes place during the First World War, not the Second. Which admittedly is kind of strange considering Wonder Woman was created in 1941, just a few months after Captain America. That's okay though, World War I doesn't get enough love when it comes to popular fiction, but between Battlefield and this movie it looks like it's making a comeback. Hopefully that's not foreshadowing for this week's election. Meanwhile, if you're on the Disney side of things, if you liked Big Hero 6, you're about to get a lot more of it. Disney XD announced that the CGI movie will be adapted into an ongoing animated series featuring most of the film's original voice cast. On a semi-related note, did anybody out there know that the Hercules animated series brought the cast of Aladdin in for an episode back in the day? I didn't until about last week. Anyway, the Big Hero 6 series will take place after the first movie and hit television in 2017. And speaking of returning voice casts in 2017, Discotek Media announced this week that they have licensed Lupin III Part 4 for a North American home release and will be utilizing the voice cast from the 2003 Pioneer Geneon dub. If you were introduced to Lupin III during its run on Toonami, then this is the dub that you're probably most familiar with, even though it's been years since these actors have voiced the roles. When Pioneer Geneon shut down in 2007, many of their licenses were transferred to Funimation, who have since then distributed several of the movies and other anime series using their own stable of voice actors. Funimation was the steward for the franchise until last year when Discotek Media stepped in, gaining the rights to Jigen's Gravestone film, which was dubbed with yet another new cast. However, with Lupin III Part 4, Discotek has reunited Tony Oliver, Richard Epcar, Lex Lang, and Michelle Ruff to reprise their roles for the first time in nearly a decade.
My name is Lupin III, grandson of the infamous Phantom Thief. I never fail in taking what I target.
And now, for the main event, BlizzCon was this week. The multi-day celebration of everything Blizzard began on Friday with some much anticipated news for Overwatch. Namely, the introduction of Sombra. At long last, we finally have details about the mischievous hacker. Sombra is an offensive character whose primary ability allows her to hack enemies, shutting down their active abilities for about 6 seconds after a short channel. To get in that close, Sombra can activate Stealth Camouflage, which gives her about 6 seconds of invisibility and increased running speed. And to get away, Sombra can use a translocator. Once she throws the beacon, she can teleport to its position for a quick escape. As a passive ability, Sombra can see enemies at low health, and her ultimate is an EMP that applies the hack debuff to all opponents in a line of sight. And if you understood everything I just said, you might want to consider trying out for the Overwatch League. Determined to make Overwatch the next big esport, Blizzard will be facilitating the creation of professional Overwatch teams in major cities across the world. Contracted players will receive a salary and benefits for competing at the professional level in weekly live streams as they compete for the top spot. But hey, Blizzard has other esports-worthy games too. Starcraft II is still getting love, along with a new balance patch and graphical rewards for playing in the game's various modes. Blizzard is still adding commanders to their co-op missions. The next upcoming commander is the infested Russian warlord Alexei Stukov, who uses a combination of Zerg and Terran units and buildings, sometimes at the same time. Along with Stukov, 2 new maps are also on the way for co-op mode, one of which adopts the popular Left to Die arcade game. Meanwhile, 2 new characters have been announced for Heroes of the Storm. King Varian Wern can multitask, operating as either a tank or a damage dealer depending on how you use him. And Ragnaros the Firelord looks like your typical damage dealer, but when push comes to shove, he can plant himself on a fort or keep and gain a new set of abilities to fend off attackers. A new map is also in development, Blackheart's Revenge, an asymmetrical attack-defense map where the offensive team has to help a ghost pirate blow up the core. And hopefully you have a friend to play with, because Blizzard is offering rewards from November 15th to January 4th for players that team up for the Nexus Challenge. Completing 15 games will reward players with an Ani Genji skin for Overwatch, while going for 30 games unlocks several heroes, a stim pack, and a special mount. Over in World of Warcraft, there wasn't much for big news this year. Patch 7.2 is on the way, bringing with it a new raid, more class stories, flying for the Broken Isles, and a variety of PvP brawls with goofy new rule sets. Meanwhile, Hearthstone is getting a new expansion with the 1920s theme romped through the mean streets of Gadgetzan. This expansion will be centered around 3 crime bosses, which introduce tri-class cards that can be used by 3 different classes. Hunters, warriors, and paladins will use the Grimy Goon cards, priests, warlocks, and mages use cards from the Cabal, and rogues, shamans, and druids will benefit from the Jade Lotus. Finally, Diablo 3 is getting some fresh meat. Well, not that fresh, I guess. The Necromancer class is being added to the game, so get ready for some corpse-exploding fun. But the Necromancer isn't the only thing bringing things back from the dead. To celebrate the franchise's 20th anniversary, a new adventure mode will send your character back in time to replay the events of the original Diablo. That brings us to this week's releases, and the holidays are already coming with Almost Christmas. Who doesn't love a movie of awkward family disasters, especially when they happen to Danny Glover, who is continually too old for this shit? And if that's not up your alley, you could check out Arrival. When aliens arrive on Earth and just kinda sit there, it's up to Lois Lane and Hawkeye to figure out what they want before people freak out and start an intergalactic war. And if you're in the mood for something a little more retro, although I can't imagine this movie getting a wide release, there's also The Love Witch. No, this movie was not made in the 1970s, it just looks that way. This blast to the past is about a witch who is a real love 'em and leave 'em type. You know, leave 'em buried in a ditch. In video games, this week on Steam we have Dofus, a re-release of Encana Studios' first turn-based MMO. If the art style looks familiar, you might recognize it from Dofus' successor, Wakfu. Next up, there's Fiery Disaster, a different take on tower defense games that has you actively targeting enemies while maintaining control of a volcano. For a more retro game, Super Rad Raygun is literally a Game Boy-themed Mega Man clone published by Screw Attack and Rooster Teeth, which alone makes it worth a look just to see what happens when guys who built careers on making videos about video games start putting out games of their own. Beholder, on the other hand, looks a bit more original. You play as a state-sanctioned landlord spying, stealing, and snitching on your tenants in a totalitarian society. It looks like you can be a good government lapdog, a defiant rebel, or a corrupt bastard, depending on how you want to play. Speaking of political revolution, Dishonored 2 is finally here. Stealth your way around your stolen kingdom as either Corvo Atano or Emily Caldwin to reclaim the throne from an evil usurper, which reminds me I really need to play the first game again. And finally, here's an unexpected release. Toonstruck is a 20-year-old adventure game where it appears that you guide Christopher Lloyd through a cartoon world. I can't help but think this is some sort of prequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That brings us to this week's CGBros video, Oro by ECV. It's light on story but heavy on sweet visuals and awesome soundtrack. And wrapping things up, if you've missed Jon Stewart as much as I have, Jake Cahan recorded part of his presentation for the Stand Up for Heroes benefit where Stewart recalls a Twitter war he got into with Donald Trump. He even remembered to turn his phone sideways.
You remember, by the way, Lincoln used to get into this shit all the time with people.
That's everything for this week, so what did you think of BlizzCon? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, share this video with your friends, and for God's sakes, go out and vote because we cannot have Fuckface Von Clownstick in the White House.